We're very delighted to have with us Kyriakos Mitsotakis in Athens. He's been in office for 1.5 years now. He started with the ambition to lead the Greek economy back to sustainable growth, but then the COVID crisis came, and last year was a devastating year for the Greek economy. The GDP shrank by more than 10%, and the deficit, the government deficit, was more than 6%. Now, the question is, how can Premier Mitsotakis get back to sustainable growth in Greece? And I'm very happy to have him here in his office in Athens. Hello, Prime Minister Mitsotakis.
Good morning.
So
good morning from Athens.
The good news is that there is money coming from Brussels with the European Recovery Fund, and Greece can receive more than 30 billion euros. And you said it is a great opportunity for Greece to transform the economy. And perhaps you can take us a little bit and explain your plans how to transform the Greek economy and get it back to growth.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this discussion. Let me, first of all, point out that the Greek statistics regarding the performance of the economy are not unusual. All European countries have been hit by a massive contraction due to COVID. And I would also like to point out that as far as dealing with the medical aspect of the pandemic, Greece has done probably better than most European countries, something which I think has also enhanced the Greek brand overall. We entered this pandemic with an underfunded public health system, but we took measures early, we communicated our message very clearly, and we've done better than most European countries on most comparative indices. At the same time, we've also used the pandemic as an opportunity to strengthen our healthcare system. I just literally came back a few minutes ago from one of our leading orthopedic hospitals where I inaugurated 30 new intensive care beds. These are contributions which will stay with us.
Right.
So strengthening our public health system was one and remains one of our main priorities. As far as the economy is concerned, I would also like to point out that in spite of the fact that most of the time has been taken up dealing with COVID, but also with international crises we had to address, such as the migration problem, we never stopped our reform impetus. You're right to point out that we were elected on an agenda to return Greece to sustainable growth, and the Greek economy was doing exceptionally well before COVID hit us, and I do believe it will do exceptionally well once we leave COVID behind us. In order for this to happen, we need to meet certain prerequisites. The first is to make sure that underlying reforms that will enhance our competitiveness will continue to be implemented. For example, simplifying the licensing process, making it easier for international businesses to set up shop in Greece. And it is interesting to point out that even during the pandemic, we've had very, very important announcements regarding massive foreign direct investments into Greece. Two examples: Microsoft decided, after making a very elaborate comparative study of many countries, to set up 3 huge data centers in Greece. Volkswagen has announced a very important project to turn one of our islands into an example of green mobility, sustainable transformation model for our islands. RWE is ready to invest in our renewable sector. So all these initiatives did take place during the pandemic, because I think there is a belief in the long-term prospects of the Greek economy. And of course, on top of that, as you pointed out, we now have the Recovery Fund, which we negotiated in Brussels last July. A very, I would say, a step change in Greece, in Europe's approach to be able to borrow at the European level and channel grants to member states. And we have submitted our Recovery and Resilience Fund program to Brussels. We intend to use these funds, 32 billion in total, 19 billion in grants, 13 billion in loans to help drive through this transformation of the Greek economy.
Can you give us an example for which projects you want to use the country, the money? Is there a flagship project, for example, or a project? Sorry?
We have quite a few. We have four important priorities regarding the Recovery Fund. A green transition, digital transformation, focus on private investments, and our big focus on skills, soft sets, education, training. And these are all very, very important initiatives. Let me just give you one example. We are already putting in place a massive program to retrofit our buildings.
Okay.
Energy efficiency is crucial for Greece. We have relatively old buildings. We can benefit from new technologies. A lot of the materials used are produced in Greece. We have a vibrant building materials industry in Greece. And of course, these are projects which are labor intensive, so we create lots of jobs. And we reduce the environmental footprint of buildings, but we also help households with lower energy and electricity bills. So we will allocate more than 3 billion euros into this program. A second very important program has been, which we have already started implementing during the pandemic, has been the digital transformation of the Greek state. As you know, the Greek state was, and to a certain extent still is, highly bureaucratic. We use the pandemic as an opportunity to offer a series of digital services to citizens. And through this digital transformation, we're transforming the fabric of the state itself. If you just look at the program we have put in place for vaccinations, it is digital end-to-end. We actually go to the end users. We don't ask them to call us. We actually send them direct SMS messages. We contact them directly. They set up their appointments electronically. It's all done seamlessly. And Greeks are actually quite surprised that the state is able to function in this new, very sort of modern way. So digital transformation is very important to us. Moving away from fossil fuels for electricity production, a topic which is also very relevant in Germany. We have an entire region in Greece, Western Macedonia, which for half a century was totally dependent on electricity production through the burning of lignite, brown coal. And we took the bold decision that we will stop producing electricity from lignite, the latest by 2028. And practically all but one of our lignite fired plants will be shut down by 2023. This obliges us to put in place a just transition plan for Western Macedonia that will create new jobs to replace the old jobs that will be lost during this transition. And of course, a significant funding for these projects will come from the Recovery Fund. So these are just a few examples. We can talk in more detail if you want to, of the projects that we do want to put in place. And what I want to highlight is that our government came into power 18 months ago. We have an absolute majority. We are committed to reforms. So we want to change the narrative regarding Greece, something which I think is particularly relevant also for the Greek-German relationship. Well, for the past decade, it was sort of a confrontational relationship. We were sort of encouraged to do reforms which we never truly believed in exchange for money that was dispersed through various programs to support the Greek economy. All this belongs to the past. We want to do reforms because we believe they're good for the country. And we also have a lot of public support in implementing these reforms. The government is more popular now than it was 18 months ago when we came into power. And we won by a significant margin. We almost got 40% in the July 2019 elections. So this is not just a strategy driven by the so-called elites. This is a strategy that wants to make the everyday life of Greeks better, to create jobs, to reduce the tax burden, to offer better public services. And that is why I think this strategy has a lot of support in Greece.
What do you expect for this year, 2021? The COVID crisis is still ongoing. When do you think that the economic impact of the funds from Brussels and also of the Greek economy itself will be seen again? When do you expect growth to be back again?
Well, a lot will depend, obviously, on COVID. Right now, because we've had better epidemiological data than most European countries, we have gradually started to reopen our economy. We gradually reopened retail. Every month, the economy is closed. We're talking about billions of cost for the state in order to be able to support companies that have remained closed because we actually told them to close. So we are very obviously dependent on how quickly the immunization project is going to run. But I do expect that as of Q2, things will improve significantly. We know that this virus is weather dependent. We saw it last year. If you add on top of that mass vaccinations, which will kick in earnest, I think in March and April, I do expect to see a significant uptake in economic activity. I also want to point out that in spite of the big contraction, we managed to protect jobs. Unemployment hasn't increased at all in Greece, and our strategy was always to support jobs to make sure that once we restart the economy, there will not be a significant burden in terms of increased unemployment. And I think so far we've been relatively successful. Another factor which I consider to be very important is tourism. We want people to be able to travel during the summer. We want Germans to be able to come to Greece. And that is why I was the first European leader to ask for a European discussion regarding what we call, a European vaccine certificate. This is not a license to travel, obviously, but it will make traveling much easier. If you are vaccinated, you should be able to travel easier, because if you're not vaccinated, we may request, all sorts of tests in order for you to enter the country. So this is very, very important. It's important for Greece. It's important for southern countries. It's also important for Germany, as vaccines will increase. Maybe now it's not a relevant discussion, but I can assure you in 3 months it will be very relevant. I think people will want to travel during the summer, and we want them to come to Greece and come safely. We did manage to open our our tourism sector last year, in spite of the difficulties, and we did it in a very safe manner. So we do expect this year, obviously we're not going to return to normal. That would be inconceivable, but we expect to do much better than we did last year, and we want people to come to Greece and travel safely and return safely to their countries of origin. So tourism is also going to be a very important determinant. And of course, we do expect the funds from the RRF to be dispersed in the second half of 2021. We already can start making payments from programs we know will be approved by the RRF. So some money is already flowing into the real economy. For example, our retrofitting program is already up and running. And because we know more or less it will be funded by the RRF. So we don't want to lose much time.
Okay, we'll come back to the discussion about the vaccination passports in a minute. I want to introduce our correspondent Gerd Höhler in Athens, who we ask what are the 3 major challenges for Greece in 2021, and so please join us in seeing what his opinion is.
Challenge number 1 is to stimulate Greek tourism and to do so safely. The travel industry is one of the most important pillars of the Greek economy, and due to the pandemic it almost completely collapsed last year. The number of foreign travelers fell by 80%. Prime Minister Mitsotakis is now proposing a corona vaccination certificate, which could open up a kind of fast lane for vaccinated travelers. The second challenge is closely related to the first. Greece must get out of the corona recession and get back to a sustainable growth path. The key to this is foreign investment. But for this to happen, the country needs to implement more reforms. A simplified tax system, less red tape, more legal security for foreign investors. The third challenge is perhaps the greatest because it is about war or peace. Greece must try to resolve the conflicts with Turkey about economic zones and natural resources in the Eastern Mediterranean. Diplomats from both countries are talking about these problems since of last week, and maybe Prime Minister Mitsotakis can tell us now where we stand.
A lot of topics we can talk about, and I'm very happy to welcome another panelist in our discussion, Tom Enders. He's the president of the German Council on Foreign Relations, DGAP, how we call it in Germany. He's been the former CEO of Airbus and now a member of several boards, among them Lufthansa. Hello, Tom Enders.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, and good morning, Prime Minister. It's good to see you.
Good morning, Tom. Good to see you.
So let's start with the tourism and the vaccination passports you mentioned earlier, Prime Minister Mitsotakis, or certificates, how you call them, because it's a part of the whole European discussion and also effectiveness in the corona crisis. So how are the responses in the EU, and when do you think these passport certificates and the privileges being combined with them could start?
Well, first of all, again, let me point out how important obviously tourism is for Greece, but not just for Greece, I mean, for the entire European economy. We want to facilitate travel. The airlines want to facilitate travel. The aircraft manufacturers, I'm sure, would want to facilitate travel, because no one wants to be in a position where we constantly support airlines in order to make sure that they survive. So the question is, how do we do that at the European level rather than on a bilateral level? You know, our proposal has been, very, very simple. What we consider to be, a proof of vaccination, to have a common European form that is essentially mutually recognized. Look, if this doesn't happen, it will happen inevitably at a bilateral level. So essentially, we have taken the decision of the level of the Council to do the preparatory work for medical purposes. And then at some point, I would say sooner rather than later, we need to discuss how this eventually will be used. But as we have sort of a common passenger locator form, which is essentially, a digital form to know who's traveling where, what we would add is simply, a mutually recognized proof of vaccination in order to make it easier for people to travel. So I consider this inevitable. The travel industry considers this inevitable. So I think the quicker we work towards that direction, the more prepared we will be as European Union. And I think we've done lots of things well at the European Union level. I know there are, for example, complaints about the pace of vaccination and about certain negotiations at the European level with the big vaccine providers. But I would still like us not to lose the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is that it is important, especially for small, medium, or medium-sized countries, that the European Union is negotiating as a whole and is distributing vaccines on a per capita basis, not separating small countries from big countries, rich countries from poor countries. This is an important step towards European solidarity. Of course, we can improve the process, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we did manage to negotiate as a European Union, and we took the political decision that the vaccines will be distributed in an equitable manner. So I do think that this discussion is mature. I see lots of countries independently are moving towards that logic, because countries also understand that they want to facilitate their citizens to travel. I am absolutely convinced that there is a suppressed demand for travel that will be released once we feel safe. And we have to, as Gerd said, we have to make sure that we do travel in a safe manner. And I do want to point out that even last year when we opened up the tourism, and yes, with significantly smaller numbers, people came to Greece and they traveled safely. We put in place last year a smart algorithm system at our borders that essentially increased the effectiveness of our random testing. So So there's a lot of logic in making sure that we use technology in order to ensure that we will be able to travel safely. And the quicker we move towards that direction, the better it will be for all European citizens.
Counter-argument could be we cannot start with vaccination certificates until everyone has the chance to be vaccinated, and this will probably not be before summer, late summer. So what is your view on this vaccination certificate discussion?
Look, I understand that obviously you need to start the discussion now because you need to prepare. And again, even today, we are discriminating at our borders. Let's be honest. We put all sorts of restrictions. We ask people to test themselves in order to enter countries. We do that all the time. So we have to be very honest. The only thing we're saying is that if you have a vaccine certificate, you don't need to get tested. You can still travel, but we may require a test. So we just make it easier. If we have half the people vaccinated, that's half the population. If we have 30%, that's 30%. It's still a relevant and an important number. Everyone will be allowed to travel. It's just, how easy you can make it for those who are vaccinated. So to those who say, now is not the time, I would say now is not the time maybe to take a decision, but now is the time to prepare for something which will inevitably happen.
Tom Enders, perhaps your view on this discussion and also on the jobs the European Union has done so far in securing vaccinations for the European Union member states.
Well, I fully agree with Prime Minister. That's a very valuable initiative. And by the way, I mean, if we go down this path of digital vaccination certificate, I think it's just an added incentive to accelerate as much as possible the vaccination process. For instance, it's not plausible why you would have vaccination only at certain centralized locations, why the local doctors can't do it. In the US, they're even now distributing vaccines to the pharmacies because pharmacies can do that just to accelerate vaccination. So I think it's very important, as the Prime Minister says, important for tourism, for the airline industry, for sure, and also for a lot of business people. And the argument being, it's not just that you can travel to other countries when you're vaccinated. We still have a testing method, etc. So it's not like forbidding people to travel to other countries because they're not vaccinated. It's just a little bit easier. I think it's a very worthwhile initiative, and frankly, I don't even see why the European Union couldn't decide on that already right away. And
concerning the procurement of vaccination in the European Union.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into this discussion. As you know, this is a particularly controversial discussion in Germany. I'm not so sure in other countries. But now Mrs. von der Leyen have even admitted, as I read, that mistakes were made. It could have been European Union could have done better, could have done faster. Watch again what happened in the US, in the UK, and Israel, etc. But the Prime Minister is right. I would also support the principle of European procurement, European distribution. But it's blatantly obvious to everybody who can read a newspaper, I would say, that the European Union has not done the finest job in as far as speed is concerned, and the negotiation part is concerned. But let's put that behind us. All the more reason now to find every possibility to accelerate vaccination across Europe as much as possible, and to be pragmatic about it.
Yeah, I would agree with Tom. What happened. But we need to be proactive. Look at the new vaccines that are in the pipeline. We know the debate regarding AstraZeneca. We've all followed it. We've been very, very clear that companies need to honor their contractual obligations, and Europe is a big enough market and a big enough power to make sure that the contracts are honored. But there are new vaccines in the pipeline. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is particularly important. Again, we hope it will work. But if it were to work, we want to make sure we have enough doses as quickly as possible. Why is it important? Because it's a single dose vaccine that can be easily distributed. So unlike the more complicated vaccines where you need a very complex supply chain to distribute them. If you have vaccines that can be administered, for example, through pharmacies, because you can transport them easily and they can be stored, either in a regular fridge or even in room temperatures, that makes the distribution of vaccines so much easier. So let's focus on the future. Let's look at the vaccines that are in the pipeline. Let's make sure that there are no delays in the approval process, assuming the vaccines, work and they provide us, they provide EMA with all the necessary data. And let's make sure that we get our hands on enough vaccines and we accelerate the vaccine process. We know that in Q2 we will have multiple number of vaccines compared to what we had in Q1, and we also need to prepare our distribution systems for vaccinating significantly larger numbers than we do now. Greece is one of the countries that are vaccinating at a very fast pace, but we've taken the decision, for example, for the Pfizer vaccine, to always keep a stock of the second dose. We never wanted to be left in a position where we wouldn't administer the second dose on time in accordance with the approval process. But let's focus on the future. Let's make sure that we will get the vaccines that we were promised we will get, and on the new vaccines, let's make sure that we are at the beginning of the queue rather than at the end of the queue.
Let me add one thing here, if I may. You talked about digital transformation, and particularly how you use digital in the whole COVID crisis, the testing, in the border security and vaccination. I think that is it's very now that Germany is really lagging behind a lot of countries here, including Greece, and that is something that has been exposed through the COVID crisis. I would say, Prime Minister, if Germans listen to that conversation, or maybe they can read it tomorrow somewhere, to hear how you treat people in Greece. You call them proactively, you send them messages. In Germany, thousands and thousands are hanging in the so-called hotlines and can't get rather be vaccinated in Greece than in Germany. So there's a blatant deficit in Germany, and it's not just around the COVID crisis. It makes obvious that our administration, the way we function, it's not the economy at large, it's not the companies, but the way the administrations work. I say plural because we have a lender. Federalism here is very, very important, that we are hopelessly out in many processes. And that's a bit of a scandal, and that needs to be dealt with as soon as possible.
Yeah, let me make one point here, which I think is important because it ties into our discussion regarding the digital transformation and hopefully the funds that we will receive. We managed to drive through what I think is a digital revolution in the Greek state because we took the decision to centralize, our digital functions into one ministry, to break down silos, to make sure that we have no proprietary issues with data. Obviously, we're fully compliant with GDPR, but we made sure that we didn't just create a digital bureaucracy to replace a paper bureaucracy, but we always had, a customer-centric approach. It was actually quite moving because we actually did send out, text messages to everyone. We have an electronic prescription system, which is actually working very, very well. So everyone who is in an electronic prescription system, and most older people are, we did send them a message and we told them, this is the slot we propose to you. If you want to change it, you can ask. If you can't do it yourself, obviously, your kid or your granddaughter will do it. And it was actually pretty moving because we started with those who were above 85 in terms of appointments. We had 98% compliance with the appointments. Oh. So once you treat the citizen as, I would quote, as a customer, and you really go out of your way to approach him or her, it's surprising how well citizens respond. And we even used a digital for COVID compliance. If you want to leave the house, even now you have to send an SMS. Obviously, it's still a gesture, and we use this very well. So if you don't have your SMS as proof when you leave the house, you'll be subject to to a fine. And at the beginning, we gave people, a paper alternative, but it was surprising how quickly everything is moving to digital. If you just offer people simple digital solutions, and how quickly even older people acquire digital skills. It's very refreshing.
You're miles ahead of Germany.
The digitalization of the public administration could be the reform project for Germany, receiving the funds from the European Recovery Fund, perhaps. Let's talk about the European Recovery Fund and the question if this is the start of Eurobonds being issued in the future. What's your take on that?
Well, we are issuing bonds. We're issuing European bonds to fund these projects.
Actually, yes.
And so I think it is. It's a very, very important step. It's not just one step in the right direction. It's a big step in that direction. I remember a year ago, this discussion would have zero traction. I remember in last March, I wrote with some of my colleagues, heads of state and government, a letter, encouraging the idea of common borrowing to address the COVID crisis. And at the time, there was a lot of resistance, but I think Chancellor Merkel saw that this was actually necessary, and there was a change in approach. And we all realized that once in a generation crisis, we do need to spend more. We need to bend some fiscal rules. We probably should be willing to accept higher debt. And the ECB has helped in that direction, providing ample, I'd almost say unlimited liquidity. Obviously, at some point, we will have to return to basic fiscal rules. But the idea that you should not spend money now, and when I say spend, I would say spend and invest money, because the Recovery and Resilience Fund is not just about spending money, it's about investing. It's about driving through transformations. It's about looking at deficiencies that countries have and making sure that they use the money to change and become more competitive. And the more competitive countries become, the more uniform our fiscal policy can be. The less of a separation there will be, between the rich and the poor, those who perform well, those who don't perform well. So it's really an opportunity to bridge the divide between European countries. It's certainly an opportunity for Greece to catch up. We don't intend to lose this opportunity, and we're very happy that, based on what we know, our plan was very well received in Brussels, and it gives us sort of encouragement that we are moving in the right direction and that the funds will be dispersed on time to help support what I think is going to be a very robust post-COVID recovery.
Tom Enders, do you think that the European Recovery Fund is an emergency instrument and ending the COVID crisis, the Eurobonds will end, or is it the start of a change in the European refinancing schemes?
Well, I would say we'll see, but I agree with the Prime Minister that this is a big step forward. At the same time, it's a big experiment. I think the question is, will this money be spent wisely, like you intend to do, obviously, in Greece, into digitalization, into sustainability, industry, etc., or will it be another example? We've had some in Europe. We have to admit it, of kind of a pork barrel initiative. In other words, that later on a lot of people will criticize it and say, look, all the money, much of the money was wasted. It was not really spent wisely in the way we originally intended to. Then this could be a one-off. But I think it's inevitable that the European Union moves toward, an economic union. And maybe 27 nations is too big a crowd. Maybe it should be 19 or even a smaller number of nations initially. I'm watching the European Union for many years. I'm a big believer in smaller circles, or the concentric circles, to start with, rather than push every initiative through at the level of 27, which is very, very difficult and can be, as we all know, highly inefficient. But yes, this recovery fund is important, but as important for the future of Eurobonds is that I would say citizens, taxpayers all over Europe see that this is money spent wisely and spent in a way that nations could not have possibly spent it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we should not also forget that a lot of these investments that will be made eventually will also benefit the stronger European economy.
Yeah.
So, for example, we were laggards in electrification. There is value added in Greece. Interestingly enough, there is also interest for investing in aspects of the automotive sector in Greece. But we will probably still, import, German cars. Hopefully, we'll build Greek chargers. But if we create a true union that is competitive, this will also benefit the stronger economy. So part of the money will return to the stronger, the export-oriented economies, and Germany is going to be a big beneficiary.
And there's a communication job to do for the big economies. I think we could do better in that respect in Germany and in other countries to emphasize the return to the domestic industries, to the European industries, and not just the benefit to one single nation, as with your 32 billion for Greece. Absolutely right.
Let's focus on some questions coming from the audience. Mark Schiffauer, he asks, Prime Minister, how would you characterize the German-Greek relations today? And how are the sentiments in Greece towards the European project in general?
I think the relationship is much improved. It was a difficult relationship during the years of the crisis. We should have no doubt about that. But I think we can make it even better. I think there is. I think we need to change the narrative. I think we need to talk about common projects of common interest. This should no longer be a borrower-creditor, debtor-creditor relationship. It should be a constructive win-win relationship when we talk about the economic aspects of the relationship. And then, of course, there is a foreign policy aspect, which is more complicated. I want to be, very honest. Part of the Greek population may think that Germany was not as supportive vis-à-vis our differences with Turkey. I do know that the Chancellor tried to play a very constructive role in trying to mediate, and I'm happy that the relationship has improved. But of course, we're always looking for European solidarity from all countries in terms of defending what we think is the right position. And I think we are right in terms of claiming that we want to resolve, our one main difference with Turkey, which is a delimitation of our maritime zones based on international law. And that vis-à-vis the EU-Turkey relationship is concerned, there are two paths. We hope for a constructive relationship, but if things don't work out in the right way, there need to be consequences on behalf of the European Union vis-à-vis Turkey. I'm encouraged by the fact that things have gotten better over the past month that we started to discuss, but I'm also not naive. I want to see consistency in this approach.
What support from Germany do you wish for?
Excuse me?
What support from Germany do you wish for?
A lot of these discussions are taking place at the level of the European Council. And the European Council has moved in the right direction. I would hope that they should have, sometimes I would hope for, an even stronger support. But overall, we did manage to highlight the fact that the relationships between Greece and Turkey, the differences between Greece and Turkey impact the relationship between Greece and the European Union. The Eastern Mediterranean is critical for the safety and security of the European Union. Obviously, Turkey is a big partner. There should be a partner in the migration issue. But when it comes to violations of sovereignty and sovereign rights, we do expect from all our European partners a uniform approach and sort of unconditional solidarity.
Tom Enders, what's your take on the European voice in this conflict?
I think the Prime Minister is very polite with respect to the German government. I have a much harsher analysis here I could share with you. But no, I think the wider problem is the EU does not have a consistent or clear policy vis-à-vis Turkey. Turkey is not the Turkey it used to be 10 or 20 years ago. Turkey is increasingly engaging in its neighborhood, in the Middle East, in the Caucasus, in Northern Africa, and is increasingly at odds also with members of the European Union. Let's talk about France, for instance. By the way, I mean, you may have been disappointed about Germany, but at least France and a couple of other countries were firmly standing by Greece in this conflict with Turkey. So the issue is to develop a consistent EU policy vis-à-vis Turkey. I don't see really today how this is possible because various countries have various interests. Spain, for instance, different than Italy, Germany, France, we mentioned already. So I'm afraid, Prime Minister, but you're the expert, not me. I'm far away. I'm afraid we will not see a consistent EU-Turkey policy for some years to come. And in some countries like Germany, let's put it on the table, the concern about the Turkish minority in Germany, which Erdogan tries to use sometimes quite cleverly, plays also an important role.
Yeah, I would add that, we've said that Europe needs to flex its geopolitical muscle and not just be an economic power. We need to add some flesh to this claim. We have an opportunity. We are preparing a report. The European Commission is preparing a report on Turkey, which will be discussed on March 25th and 26th at the European Council. And the report needs to lay down all the options vis-à-vis Turkey. I'm not a fan of imposing sanctions, but the threat of sanctions needs to be credible. If it's not credible, then it doesn't work. And I do think that we made a step in the right direction. And I think one of the reasons why Turkey took a step back and is being more constructive also had to do with the fact that they realized that even at a slow pace, Europe is moving towards that direction. And sometimes, if you want to be a geopolitical power, you want to accept the fact that you may take an economic hit. So if you do decide, at any point, for example, the US decided to impose sanctions on Turkey. They decided not to sell F-35 fighters to Turkey. That's a big blow for the US or for the US defense sector, but they decided to do it because they said that this is the right approach. We cannot accept Turkey operating S-400 missiles, which are Russian-made, sophisticated anti-aircraft missiles, and at the same time purchase F-35 airplanes. So you can't have your cake and eat it. For example, Germany is planning to export attack submarines to Turkey. This is an issue of concern to us. These are, highly sophisticated, attack submarines. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that there are instruments and levers that one can use if one wants to flex sort of the geopolitical muscle and not just the economic muscle. Sometimes it's like we have two hands and one hand is very bulky, maybe, I don't know, like a tennis player, and that's the economic hand. And then the geopolitical hand seems to be rather weak. So I would like to see both hands of equal sort of size and bulk.
So what should we do about Russia and China then? It's the last question because time is actually up, but I think we have to make this point again. We have the Navalny verdict in Russia. Should the EU impose new sanctions on Russia? And if we compare the Chinese situation in Hong Kong, for example, is it right to have an investment agreement between Europe and China right at this point? Last question, and please short answers.
I think we need to be firm on the Navalny issue, unequivocally condemn what is happening, and I do think that sanctions consistently, when they are imposed, they do impose a toll. They need to be imposed in a smart way. China is a much more complicated topic. It probably requires a completely different discussion. China is both a partner, a trade partner, but also conceivably a strategic adversary. This is a more complicated relationship, but I am in favor of moving ahead with the investment approach, but this should not force us to remain silent on issues which should be of great concern to us.
Tom Enders.
I think these are two issues, Russia and China, where Germany is at odds with at least some of its European partners, and particularly with the US. I find it very unfortunate that, for instance, Russia is not just Navalny, it's Nord Stream 1. This is or Nord Stream 2. This is the project that is highly controversial, not just between Europe and the United States, but inside Europe. Germany shows no sign of at least freezing that project. The China agreement was rushed. Everybody knows that because Mrs. Merkel wanted a success before the end of the German presidency of the European Council, end of December. The incoming administration asked, please, can we try to coordinate our China policies? The EU, and a lot under German pressure, I would say, my observation, concluded that agreement. Now, how important it is, it has a lot of holes, it has a lot of deficits, but it's not a sign to the incoming administration, neither on Russia nor on China, that Europe is willing to coordinate its policies. That's unfortunate. That may be healed, but it's not a good start, particularly for the German-US relationship.
Kyriakos Mitsotakis, Tom Enders, thank you very much. We could go on and we do this another time. Ina, entschuldige bitte die 3 Minuten Verspätung, aber jetzt gerne zurück an dich.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Ganz herzlichen Dank, Nicole. Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Tom Enders.